Okay, thank you very much. Members, we do have quorum. I will now call the 6 p.m. meeting of the Budget Subcommittee to order. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? No? Okay, so we will recess the 6 p.m. meeting until we complete the 3 p.m. meeting. We didn't get an opportunity to finish the deputation for 3 p.m., so we're going to complete that, then go into the 6 p.m. So members, the 3 p.m. meeting of the Budget Subcommittee is now resumed. We will complete the speakers list, receive the item, and then resume the evening session. So our next speaker on the 3 p.m. deputation list is John Gibb. Okay, John, you have 5 minutes.
On behalf of my wife, my children, and grandchildren, I respectfully implore the members of this committee to support full funding for the total potential costs of the Transform Toronto Climate Action Strategy. As a resident in Ward 25, I share with all Torontonians the cost of the existential threat resulting from anthropogenic emissions, primarily of carbon dioxide and methane, as clearly established by the International Panel on Climate Change. During the windstorm last June, our house, along with many of our neighbors' homes, received damage to the roof. Other homes lost siding. The damage throughout the city, including extensive flooding and power outages, has been well documented. I fully empathize with all those affected by flooding, having seen properties north of Toronto damaged by what used to be considered a 50-year flood, only to see it reoccur twice in less than half a decade. In order for the local EMS crew to achieve a timely response for an elderly resident, the fire department had to provide a boat for her rescue. Here in Toronto, all our emergency services were pushed to their limits through higher than normal response requirements under difficult driving conditions. We know that climate costs are not all financial. Aspects of Toronto's budgetary response to the challenges of a rapidly changing climate may be said to fall within the realm of the doctrine of public trust. We may soon find that Toronto will not be able to afford the expected massive costs of the climate crisis without placing a severe and unsustainable financial burden upon residents and small businesses. I'm asking members of this budget to request that Council give serious consideration to having Toronto join the City of Victoria and other Canadian municipalities in climate accountability initiatives. Quoting with permission from the West Coast Environmental Law Association's work, putting 100% of climate costs on taxpayers is not only unfair, it's bad economics. If a company benefits from pollution without paying a share of the cost, it has no incentive to shift toward a less polluting business model. We know that fossil fuel companies like Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, and others are not being blindsided by calls for their accountability. Along with their billions of dollars in profit, we know they have known, for instance, since the 1960s, that their products would cause climate change with devastating impacts to communities globally. Please keep in mind that roughly 1/2 of all emissions produced since the 1850s occurred after 1986. They've also undermined all manner of greener and more sustainable technology. They funded and participated in massive misinformation campaigns created to mislead the public and governments at all levels. They also lobbied against meaningful international agreements on climate change. We know that big tobacco, asbestos, and pharma have all learned that if you sell a product that is killing people or harming communities, you're going to have to pay some of the costs caused by your products. Until it learns that lesson, big fossil fuel will continue the status quo of increasing production to maximize profit and stall our efforts for positive change. In British Columbia, 16 local governments, including Victoria, have voted to send letters to Chevron, Exxon, Saudi Aramco, and 17 other global fossil fuel companies that are collectively responsible through their operations and products for almost 30% of human-caused greenhouse gases. The letters describe each community's climate costs and ask the companies to pay a fair share of those costs. You may be aware a peer-reviewed study ranks the top 100 global emitters of greenhouse gases. In conclusion, If we are going to solve climate change in the limited time we have, we need a strong incentive for companies in the fossil fuel energy industry to invest in renewable energy alternatives over fossil fuels. Governments at all levels need to include the true costs of fossil fuels in their financial decisions. Toronto has to have the resources it needs to protect its citizens and minimize future costs. Insisting that fossil fuel companies join in paying for the costs of climate change is a way to meet these needs. By demanding an end to the free ride for the largest global fossil fuel companies and their responsibility to start paying a fair share for climate costs, we will be much more likely to respond to the climate crisis in a timely and effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you for speaking to this important topic. I'm wondering if your advocacy is also extending to the provincial government, which is pushing back on putting a price on carbon.
Sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Are you also advocating to the provincial government to put a price on carbon?
Will be doing, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next deputant is Kingsley Kwok. Five minutes. Thank you.
Am I not taking the place of Chelsea Braun? I don't want to take that person's place, but thank you, Councillor, and also Councillor McKelvey and Bradford. Greetings. Happy Lunar New Year. My name is Kingsley Kwok. I represent TTC Riders. Grassroots transit user lobbying organization that should be no strangers to the Toronto Transit Commission or other city budget committees. 35,000 people in Scarborough use the RT, and when extreme weather events happen like last week and then this week, the Scarborough RT, which has maintenance issues and is in need of replacement, gets shut down, and buses are used to replace the RT to take passengers to the next hub, which is the Kennedy subway station. I think it illustrates the capital gap with transit infrastructure in Toronto and just the poor transit service Scarborough residents and transit users have to rely on. And so in late January, when the Toronto Transit Commission voted to increase bus fares, subway fares, streetcar fares for the 8th time in the last 9 years, it's a disappointment. But I guess we have to thank City Hall for the 1 year that there was frozen transit fares, and that was last year when it was an election year. So I guess one should just say, let's have election year every year so that at least the fare will be frozen. Because what if in March when councillors vote for the budget, which includes an increase in transit fares, it will mean that Scarborough transit users will have to pay more while still waiting longer for their bus to get to Scarborough Centre, which is one of the hubs here, to squeeze into a more crowded subway car or a more crowded RT vehicle, experience the freezing temperatures to go to Kennedy, just to go downtown and points west to get to work and to go to school. Scarborough residents go to Ryerson too. Scarborough residents go to the University of Toronto, St. George campus. They go to York, they go to Humber, and it is at least a 1-hour ride. And I want to acknowledge George Brown and other downtown colleges too. TTC riders has always reminded everyone that the Toronto Transit Commission is the lowest funded transit system in North America. Even Andy Byford had said that. I guess even Jennifer Keesman had said that. We can't wait for another year for better service. We don't want another fare hike. We want better service. And we want the Toronto Transit Commission to be properly funded. When there's a capital funding gap, when there's a maintenance funding gap, that's the problem. It's like when is there another stoppage of the Toronto Transit when there's another signal upgrade that needs to be done. Please get on with these, because otherwise it's another day of waiting for buses when the RT is shut down. It's another day when people want to try to get to work and line 1 is shut down in parts of the stations. It's really frustrating. And
Can you please wrap up?
thank you. And one other thing for the poverty reduction strategy, one new thing that we want to say, how about a free TTC on extreme weather alerts?
Thank you. Your time's up. Questions? Councillor Bradford?
Thanks for the deputation and all the work that TTC Riders does on this front. I know we've heard from folks today and at TTC Commission as well. We were presented with a budget from the TTC this year with the fare increase, and nobody was excited about that. And I take your point about an election year with the fare freeze last year, but it's also important to remember we are in an election year this year, and I was wondering if TTC Riders had any plans to mobilize that around that, specifically operating dollars from our, in this instance, federal partners, if you guys are going to be working on that as well.
Yes, of course. It's not just city councillors that we target. We also try to lobby members of provincial parliament and members of parliament. And so we have postcard campaigns, we have petitions, and especially, I think there was a previous speaker from Scarborough who mentioned that there are transit deserts and neighborhoods like Eastern Scarborough, where we want to have light rail transit, whether it's Shepherd, whether it's Malvern, whether it's University of Toronto's Scarborough campus, whether it's Kingston Galloway. We want a complete network of transit as opposed to these, spoken, hubs and spokes, where you're just in a bus shelter waiting for that bus just to go into a crowded bus. We have always been lobbying at various levels because when we say TTC is the least funded, yes, obviously City Hall is not funding that, but we want the provincial government and the federal government to, for example, divert part of that gas tax to municipalities for transit, and also the provincial government to fund municipalities better so that municipal transit commissions.
Right. Well, and I think that's a really good point. We are making a bigger investment on both operating and capital side than we ever have before from the city's end. But definitely we need to put that pressure on the federal government as well, and appreciate your support in that.
Thank you.
When you do that, we'll be behind you.
Thank you. I think the bigger fight would be if the province decides to upload it. That's where we'll have the fight.
Thank you.
Okay, our next deputant is Jim Robb.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors, and thank you for taking on the role of leadership. I know it's not an easy task to make decisions in a big and complex city like the City of Toronto. Today I'd like to suggest to you the pressing need for a multi-level government fund to acquire and restore headwater lands upstream from Toronto so that we don't suffer from increasing pollution and flooding and erosion costs due to climate change. So all the scientists and all the insurance companies are telling us that the costs are just spiraling out of control. This is a picture of Finch Avenue. I believe this is the 2005 storm. It washed it out. But it's happening over and over again, and the costs are enormous. This is a picture of a relatively newly designed community in northeast Scarborough along the Morningside tributary. And of course, Markham is developing and intensifying, and more water is coming down. And this went right over the roads and almost took out some of the roads in that community and backed up into the basements. And that's occurring in more and more homes and communities throughout Toronto. The 2013 storm was about $850 million, according to the insurance companies. 300,000 people were affected. It's supposedly the most expensive natural disaster in Ontario's history. I think Hurricane Hazel would be if you did it in today's dollars, but that's expensive. And the power system was left hanging by a thread. And this is a foreshadowing of what will happen more and more often, and the costs will be prohibitive if we don't deal with the problem now. The Credit Valley Conservation Authority put out a report in 2014, and it says all orders of government can be sued for negligence. Each order has a strong incentive to consider its procedures and systems in light of new information, including climate change. And we know that the storms are getting bigger, that our infrastructure and our floodplains are not designed to accommodate the increasing volumes and intensity and frequency of storms. So it's a very big liability that's growing. There was an Insurance Bureau of Canada report in 2018, and it was covered in a number of newspapers. And the Insurance Bureau said that the claims have quadrupled in the last 9 years to an average of $1.8 billion per year. And they've actually, individuals and governments they take care of 3 to 4 times that cost. So the insurance industries get stuck with slightly less than $2 billion, and individuals and governments get stuck with another $4 billion. And the Calgary flood, for instance, 2013, that was estimated to be about $6 billion flood. Now, this report came out with something quite interesting, which most people involved in watershed science have known for years, is that one of the best ways to avoid this is to actually restore forests and wetlands. And the Insurance Bureau itself said this, the TD Bank has done work on this, Conservation Authority's done work on this. The problem is we're not doing it enough. This is a study that was commissioned by the Ontario government in 2009. It estimates that 1 hectare of near urban wetlands gives you the value of $161,000 of flood control, pollution prevention, and other public benefits per year. And you don't, unlike a bridge or a road, you don't have to rebuild it every 30 or 40 years. Most of these things are relatively self-sustaining. And the cost to create a hectare of wetland is probably about $20,000 per year. So for a $20,000 investment, you get perpetually $161,000 return. Forests are similar. They're $25,000 hectare per year. For a $10,000 per hectare investment, you get a return of $25,000 per year in perpetuity. So watershed plans have been done. The problem is they're not being implemented. And that actually increases your liability, your chance of getting sued successfully, the chances of upstream communities being sued by downstream, because the plans are there and they tell us what we should be doing, and we're ignoring them. We're going ahead with more pavement, more development, more infrastructure, but we're not going ahead in parallel with these watershed plans. And this is an example how quickly the landscape can change. Those 2 arrows point to the same spot on a landscape, and just 9 years apart, or 8 years apart, you could see how the landscape on the left would have about 40 millimeters of rainfall runoff each year. The landscape on the right would have almost 0 because it's absorbed and tunneled underground. This is a wetland that was created in the Rouge Park. Again, that wetland's about 7 or 8 acres. That's $1 million. $1 million of benefits per year. So here are the 3 requests. One is that you request...
Thank you. Your 5 minutes is up.
Okay, I will send you, if you would like a little bit more information, just ask me a question, please.
We will do that. Councillor Bradford?
Just a request, would you send me the deck to my email? please?
Yes, we'll send you all the information and the 3 requests. They're basically to ask the federal government to implement the existing watershed plans in Rouge Park, to create a multi-level government fund to acquire and restore lands, and to ask the federal government to improve the Ecological Gifts Act so that developers and private landowners can actually give land for tax relief.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Just quickly, and my question is, do you think that some of your recommendations could be done through the ravine strategy which is being developed? Is there potential for us to incorporate those into that strategy?
It's possible, but I think they're really separate. I think that the ravine strategy are existing areas in Toronto, and their problem is more of a terrestrial, well, it's aquatic too, but their problem is more of what is the species diversity and why is it disappearing? This is more of a problem of what's happening upstream. What are your liabilities from the runoff that comes off the land? There's some synergies there, but I really think you need a $100 million a year strategy from all 4 levels of government. So Toronto, York Region, and upstream municipalities, the province, and the federal government. Toronto had about $8 million a year. I was speaking to former councillor DeMaremaker was up there earlier in the day, and we were talking about this. And back in around 2010, he had managed to get about $8 million set aside per year for acquiring land. And when the Ford government, or the Mayor Ford came in, that plan sort of was removed. You need to go back to that and get other partners to step up to the plate, or your legal and your actual physical costs of remediation are just going to climb. If you don't do it now, the land's not getting any cheaper, the climate's not getting any kinder.
Thank you. Okay. Paul Beatty. Okay, 5 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Beatty. I've been in Scarborough since I was 3 years old. I've been a homeowner for the last 30 years in Scarborough, and I just wanted to make some comments on a couple of subjects. The first was the TTC. The gentleman made a comment about the over budgets of $400 million, $200 million. We could have used that money to maybe fix my sidewalk, fix the road in front of my house. I'm sure it could have gone a long way to other projects in the city rather than just being spent because people can't do the work in a timely manner. The other thing is, and I've seen it and friends have talked about it, is this initiative that kids 12 and under can get on the TTC for free. So what I've seen is kids with beards getting on the TTC for free. I don't see why seniors cannot get on for free, as they paid for most of the TTC over the last, 50 or 60 years. And the other thing about seniors is when they get 65, which establishes you at a senior, why they could not have their property taxes and their garbage and their water all stay at that level and give them a break instead of having, them increase rates year after year. And on the subject of that, the property tax I have no problem with, but in my area, I see a lot of houses that have parking, 6, 7 cars in the driveway. I see houses that have terrible extensions on their driveways, and why they need this much parking. I know a few of them, they got rooming houses where the whole place is rented out to families. They're making good money. They're using up more than their portion of power and sewers and that, parking out front, all these cars. Why those people aren't paying more property taxes? Because they're pocketing cash for sure from, who knows, 3 to 5 families in one house. They should be paying more. The other thing is the garbage rate, I don't understand, is going up. When not too long ago, we contracted out to supposedly keep garbage rates lower. And from this newest increase, it wouldn't surprise me if we're right back to the level before we contracted out. We could have used our own people. The other thing is the water rates. Before amalgamation, my father was commissioner, a utility commissioner in Scarborough. We had the lowest electrical rates and the lowest water rates. And he told me that time, he said, you watch, they'll start raising the water rates because they want to get some income on something that is fairly low priced. And that's exactly what's happening nowadays. So anyways, I just wanted to leave you with those comments. And any questions, or am I fairly straightforward? Yeah? Okay, good enough. Thank you. Have a good evening.
I just wanted to make one comment about the seniors, the property tax. You know that seniors can apply for a tax rebate and deferral.
Below a certain income, right?
Yeah.
And that's property down around the poverty level.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that if you were of
For
it.
everything, you know, why shouldn't they? And yet some kid with a beard who obviously is not 12 years old is getting on the bus for free.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Our next deputant is Chris Coos. 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Christopher Gus. I am a member of the Toronto Youth Cabinet and a civil engineering student and co-founder and transportation director of the University of Toronto's Sustainable Cities Club. When I was in high school, I had the option of walking half an hour to school, taking the bus, which usually involved a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute wait, and a 10-minute ride, and that's if I didn't have to wait for 2 or 3 buses to pass by, or biking for roughly 10 minutes. When I did take the bus, yeah, I couldn't get on for a while, and I'd have to wait even longer. And I couldn't bike to school because the infrastructure wasn't there. And my father thought that the cyclist and pedestrian fatality rates were too high, which I myself agree with. Related to transportation, I'd like to express support for earlier on Gideon Foreman's call to hasten the delivery of the Toronto Cycling Network. Councillor Karagiannis isn't here, but in response to his question regarding funding for bike lanes, my parents both own property and both own cars and both really, really, really want bike lanes in our neighborhood. I soon will also own property, hopefully, if I can afford to in the city, and I would like some of my money there to go towards the cycling network. And I'm sure that they're not alone. I am sure that any parent who has children under the age of 16 who either don't have licenses or can't afford to have a car to drive would like their children to have the independence to move around economically, safely, and quickly. And that's why I support bike lanes. But on another note, I study civil engineering, which consumes roughly 60 hours of my time per week. If I were to stay at home at Victoria Park in Lawrence, where I grew up, where I was born, I would not have been able to balance my studies, my health conditions, extracurricular interests, and the 2 hours per day spent commuting. And so I moved downtown. And I'm aware of how privileged I was to be able to do this. Many of my peers do not have the same privilege. When I do, however, travel between my parents' home and school, University of Toronto, during rush hour, I can never find a seat and often have to watch full buses, full subway cars pass by me. When I return home, as I did today for this meeting, I find bunching and delays to be the norm on many of Toronto's high-volume surface routes. As a hopeful future civil engineer, I know that the value of an efficient, high-capacity public transit system extends beyond its users. Transit benefits cities economically, improves accessibility and mobility by allowing its residents to affordably get from A to B without increasing traffic congestion. However, as fares are scheduled to increase, transit will become a much larger expense for many Torontonians who struggle to make ends meet. As a civil engineering student, I also know that the TTC needs a certain amount of money to operate efficiently, and that money cannot come out of nowhere. However, I would argue that instead of increasing fares, the TTC's subsidy by the city, the per fare subsidy, should be increased. Because it is quite shameful that the TTC receives the lowest per rider subsidies in North America. Over 60, I believe it was 65% last year, of the operating budget comes from fares. Which is much, much higher than any major North American city. You take New York, you take Chicago, you take Boston, you take LA, take York region, where it's so much more subsidized than it is here per rider. And so I think that if the TTC funding cannot be found inside the current budget, I support the implementation of road tolls, high occupancy toll lanes, or bring back the vehicle registration tax. Essentially, I am in favor of raising taxes. In summary, I call on the Budget Committee to consider additional investments in transportation infrastructure, cancel the proposed 10% fare increase, and consider raising a tax specifically to fund public transportation, which there is a precedent for in other cities. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe Boston and New York have one. Additionally, we need to close the 15-year, $24 billion large capital investment funding gap. I think that that is a priority, and I think if we can't find that money now, how are we going to find it in the future? On a personal note, outside of transit, I think we should have a serious increase in property taxes. My parents want to pay it, and I will want to pay it once I become a homeowner. In 2017, Toronto's property taxes were the lowest out of any Greater Toronto and Hamilton area municipality. And since then, it has only kept pace with inflation and is scheduled to only keep pace with inflation. And I think that's incredibly irresponsible, especially in a city that is as strapped for funding as Toronto is, and with as much income inequality as the city of Toronto. Frankly, my friends at U of T, who are all future young professionals in technology, computer science, engineering, and management, we all want to pay our fair share. We want to live close to work, we want adequate transit, we want bike lanes, and we want good, safe pedestrian infrastructure. We want to live in equitable, sustainable cities, and we know these things are going to come at a price, but we want to pay our share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, I just a couple comments. You are aware that after amalgamation that the province downloaded TTC to the municipality.
Yes.
And as you know now, they want to upload it. And I think that's a bigger fight for the TTC riders.
Oh, yes,
And as well as if you want to pay more in property tax or your parents, you can do that now. When you get your tax bill, there's a form in your tax bill that says if you want to give more, you can. You have to sign a form and send it into the city. Unfortunately, nobody has signed up for that. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oscar,
Motion first.
before I go to the next debutant, I have a motion that speakers who have not pre-registered for the 6 to 8 p.m. session of the Scarborough Civic Center consultations be allowed to register to speak until 7 p.m. February 7, 2019, after which no further registration is allowed and the speakers list will be closed for the 6 to 8 p.m. session. All in favor? Carry. Thank you. Oscar Scott. 5
Okay.
minutes?
Okay, that's working, I guess. Okay. Yeah, my name is Oscar Scott Guzman. I go by Scott. I've lived in Scarborough Southwest for about 2 years. I'm a tenant rep in a Toronto community housing building. I advocate for tenants to Toronto community housing and sometimes to politicians as well. I'd like to thank Anna Kim, who spoke a bit ago, and Scan for helping me with this deputation. Today I want to talk about the need for the city to invest in affordable, decent housing, and I also want to offer some ideas for how the city's budget can better support the creation and maintenance of affordable, decent housing. First, let me share with you a picture of the issues that arise because of the lack of affordable, decent housing. I'm an ODSP recipient. I spent some time living in a rooming house, and even that I was barely able to afford. I had to leave this living situation because a fellow tenant threatened to kill me. When I left, I had a hard time finding another place to live, even a rooming house, because of the first and last month's rent requirement, and people don't like to rent to people on social assistance as well. I ended up in a shelter for a month. I was lucky because I was able to secure a home in a TCHC building where I live now, a bachelor. This has made my housing slightly more affordable, by $10 to be exact. This is because social assistance support for housing is proportional to the cost of rent. So if your rent is less, they give you less. But even in my TCHC building, which has about 340 people, there are problems with the structure and maintenance of the building. A few weeks ago, some pipes burst, freezing, probably due to the extreme cold at the time, resulting in flooding, perhaps a dozen units on 4 floors, including my own. I got home to find my floor covered. Just barely didn't quite reach the power bar, or else I would have gotten short circuit. There are also residents with mental health problems in my building who can and have caused harm to others. If it's really bad, such a guy hitting walls and breaking glass with a hammer, they do get rid of them. But there is a tenant in my building who's put in over 60 noise complaints, and he's still suffering. Crimes happen, sometimes violent ones, especially at night, and making it so people don't want to leave their units at night. The sad thing is that in some ways, people in Toronto community housing buildings are more fortunate than many. There's a huge 10-year waiting list of over 100,000 people who would like to get into subsidized housing. I was able to get into TCHC building after waiting several years, being on ODSP, and living in a shelter, so they bumped me a bit. People, regardless of where they live and how much income they have, all deserve basic decency in their homes, and they have the right to feel safe and secure and to receive support when necessary. So here are some priorities I think City Council should consider for the proposed 2019 city budget. One, more funding has to be available for the TCHC repair backlog. Pipes should not be bursting and flooding people's homes. Homes should be maintained. We need to address the repair backlog. The city needs to prioritize this infrastructure investment over things like the Gardner Expressway or the subway extension to the mall. I mean, I know that Tory's lobbyist friend liked that, but it's not really what we need. Okay, 2, more affordable housing needs to be available urgently, especially in Scarborough, where rooming houses are illegal. We are currently living in a housing crisis. The wait list for TCHC is massive. Tenants are losing their homes due to rent evictions. Many can't find affordable housing at all. Shelters are full and people are dying. People are living in fear and vulnerability. The recently passed Housing Now initiative is a start, but we need a bolder and bigger strategy. While we wait for developments, I suggest that the city follows through on its rooming house pilot projects. The city needs to offer more supports for tenants, especially vulnerable ones, like people who live on a low income. For example, the city needs to allocate more money to the TTC Fair Pass discount program so it can be extended to people receiving housing subsidies, not just people who are on ODSP and OW. That was supposed to be part of phase 2, but in this year's budget, only people with childcare subsidies would be eligible. We get the city we plan for. As our city councillors, you have the power to plan for a city that is affordable and decent for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? No? Thank you. Our next deputant is Claudia Appiatin. Claudia Appiatin. I think I pronounced it correctly. Okay. Derek Spooner. Are you Derek?
Just gonna put the
Want us to go to the next one?
me?
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Derek Spooner, and I'm the Executive Director of Scarborough Arts. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and for your ongoing support of the arts community in Scarborough. Scarborough Arts is a local arts service organization and is designed to address the needs and interests of artists, arts organizations, and residents in Scarborough by providing arts and cultural programming and services outside the downtown core of Toronto. Many of you are familiar with Scarborough Arts, which offers multi-generational programming to a wide stakeholder group across the Scarborough region. Last year, in partnership with the City of Toronto's Cultural Hotspot Initiative, we launched the Scarborough Sign, and I would like to show you a short video reel about the project, which highlights the communities and artists that Scarborough Arts benefits. We were able to collaborate with a lot of amazing up-and-coming designers as well as seasoned designers to create a sign that is mobile.
Although Scarborough is very much Toronto, it's a country of its own culturally. And so that Scarborough sign is saying, this is our turf, this is where we're from, Scarborough with pride.
So I'm really watching it bring some cross-community and cross-generational engagement to the people that are participating.
I think it's really important that young people are able to write on the sign because it shows that they leave a piece of themselves behind and they become a part of the Scarborough sign.
Every kind of person from any kind of background, from any country, lives here. Eating each other's food. Scarborough is unlike most places in the world. It's tough because I don't want it to be completely gentrified, and I'd love to see more exhibitions happen here. Serious galleries opening in Scarborough for Scarborough people so that people who live downtown come to Scarborough to see arts and culture here that has the voice of so many different people, like true Canadiana.
The benefits of the arts sector to the City of Toronto are clearly outlined in facts researched by the Toronto Arts Foundation in 2018. 89% of Torontonians think the arts make Toronto a better place to live because the arts engages people with new ideas, raises awareness of social issues, and bolsters the city's economy. For every $1 invested by the city in an arts organization in 2018, $20.45 was raised from other sources, including $8.66 in ticket sales and $6.21 in donations. This achieves maximum impact and return on investment, directly benefiting the people of Toronto, especially those in neighborhood improvement areas. Again, I thank the Budget Committee for their support of the arts to date, and I ask that the committee continue on this momentum and follow through with the following recommendations. That Mayor John Tory and Toronto City Council continue as champions for increased investment in the arts as a key contributor to a vital and prosperous city. That the City Council considers increasing its arts investment by $2 million in 2019. And that in consultation with the arts community, we ask that City Council fulfill Mayor Tory's campaign commitment to develop a new culture plan for Toronto, setting objectives and funding targets reflective of Toronto as both an international arts destination and a city rich with locally accessible arts programming and engagement. This increased funding to the arts and culture sector will allow arts organizations like Scarborough Arts and others to continue to build its services, support the Scarborough arts community, and leverage the arts activities outside the downtown core. In closing, I'd like to share a quote from Scarborough-based filmmaker Keshav Kumar, with whom we are currently working on our Real Scarborough pilot program in 2019, that sums up the importance of community arts. Every artist is not just built upon their creativity and potential, especially in today's day and age. It takes many supporting hands to give an artist the chance to speak their voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor McKelvey?
The city has a new economic development and culture plan that's come out.
Yeah.
How do you think that fits with Scarborough? Do you think it needs to be refined, each district on their own? Is there unique needs in different places in the city?
I think that, are we talking about the strategic plan from 2018 to 2022? Yes, I actually think that that plan is quite comprehensive in terms of its tenets, in that I think it actually does represent the areas in which we need to grow, particularly in inclusion and accessibility. I think one of the main things that I hear the most from artists is the need for accessible space to actually practice their craft or meet to develop certain artistic ideas. And so that's, I think, one of the most important points from that plan, but I think that really is relevant to all areas across the GTA.
And so do you think that space for artists right now is equitably distributed across the city?
I think that there is definitely a need in Scarborough for, I think, utilizing the spaces that exist in a more effective manner. So perhaps creating some types of infrastructure to places like Cedar Ridge that is 15 minutes walk from any local bus station, but also that, for example, the feasibility study for the Living Arts Center provides another opportunity for us to really think about how can we, develop an art gallery, a performance space that brings together multiple communities in the Scarborough region, and I do think that that's something that's also needed. So I think there is quite a bit of work to be done around that. Does that answer your question?
And has your organization written a letter of support for a feasibility study?
Yes, we have, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next deputant is Rosemary. Where is it now? If I don't pronounce it correctly, I apologize. I was close. Okay, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a resident of Ward 24, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to the Budget Subcommittee today about ensuring that the 2019 budget includes the full staff requested investment in Transform TO, as well as in other programs and infrastructure that will create a prosperous, safe, and equitable low-carbon future for Torontonians. Before I get into the meat of my deputation, I want to congratulate Councillors Bradford and McKelvey on their recent electoral victory, and I'm pleased that you're here to listen and learn from the people of Toronto that after working so hard to earn the privilege to represent them. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Nunziata for championing Transform TO last year. You were the one that put forward the motion to include it in the full funding in the budget last year. I am an elementary school French teacher, and for many years I have been teaching 7 classes a day from grades 1 to 8. This means that I have had the honor of watching and participating in the students' growth and flourishing throughout their elementary school years. This year, however, I'm on a leave of absence as I pursue graduate studies full-time. I'm glad that I have this year off because in October, the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, released an alarming report informing the world that we have only until 2030, 11 years, to cut our emissions in half if we are to avert the tipping points that will lead to uncontrollable climate change and a cascade of worldwide social and ecological disasters. Since that time, the urgency of the call has been met with little action. I am glad that I am not daily facing my young students whose futures are so severely threatened, because I want to be able to tell them that we adults are doing all that we can, everything in our power to fix this for them, but I can't say that. Currently, my students seem doomed by our complacency to a very bleak future. However, Transform TO does give me hope. It is a model for the type of climate action cities must pursue worldwide. With adequate investment, the Transform TO plan has the city on track to reduce emissions by 65% by 2030. It allows us to make our contribution and lead the way in the worldwide reductions called for in the IPCC report. So it is imperative that we include full funding for Transform TO in the 2019 budget. But we can't stop there. All budgetary, policy, and regulatory decisions must be made through a climate justice lens, with the 11-year horizon in mind. For instance, since transportation takes up 35% of Toronto's emissions, we must stop prioritizing cars and begin privileging public transit and active transportation. To invest properly in these and so many other vital needs that have been highlighted here today, we have to increase city revenues. I recommend that along with a higher increase in property tax, that we reinstitute the vehicle registration tax. Along with garnering revenue, this tax will encourage the needed cultural shift away from our motor vehicle-dominated lifestyle. To help accelerate Transform TO's transportation electrification plan, I would recommend that electric vehicles be exempt from this tax. As a hybrid driver, I'm halfway there. Nonetheless, I'm happy to pay a full price, the full vehicle registration tax, with the knowledge that the money that is invested in efforts to create a just, low-carbon future for Toronto. So in conclusion, I request that the city fully invest in Transform TO, increase funding to public transit and active transportation infrastructure, and improve revenue streams through increased property taxes and the reinstatement of the vehicle registration tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Fatima Courier? Fatima? No. Sayeda Salman? So she's the last one. Yeah. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, members of Budget Committee and everyone. My name is Sayeda Zarka Salman. I'm the Student Nutrition Coordinator Program at Samuel Hearn School in Ward 20. I would like to thank you for giving the opportunity to be here today. At Samuel Hearn School, we run the morning meal program where we serve 405 students daily, 5 days a week. We kick off the students' days by providing them with milk, grains, and fruits and vegetables. Especially, we introduce new items such as mangoes and pizza to our menu that our student nutrition and students would find interesting, and they get happy. We strive towards serving all students regardless of their ability to contribute financially, taking into consideration various religious restrictions and allergies. We have amazing volunteer parents who participate and contribute to make our program more successful. They share their ideas and new recipes for our menu. Also, I must say thank you to our school staff for supporting us on a daily basis, especially caretaker who are always ready to help us. The students are also happy with our nutrition program. They look very excited when they come to pick up their snacks in the morning with bright smiles. We are happy to serve them too. Without the city generous financial contribution, we would not be able to run this program smoothly. On behalf of my school, Samuel Hearn Middle School, I would like to thank you, the city, and all respected council members for their financial contribution. And our school student nutrition program in a very good shape because your supports make possible. Thank you once again for taking your precious time and listening to us.
Thank you. Are there any
Thank you.
questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I move, that's it, I move that the Budget Subcommittee for the Scarborough and Etobicoke consultations receive for information the public presentations and the communications submitted by the members of the public. All in favor? The 6P, okay. So now I have to move this one, right? Okay.
No, it's the same thing. That's fine. So now you move to the 6 p.m. deputations.
Okay, now I move that we're now into the 6 p.m. deputations. So that concluded the 3 to 5, and now we're at the 6. Yeah. So our first deputant for the 6 o'clock is Dave Hardy. Where's Mr. Hardy? Right here. Okay, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councilors, and staff. I wear a number of hats. I'm also the executive director of the Institute for New Suburbanism, which is a think tank in Scarborough. Questions? Sorry, let me go back one here. Yeah, there we go. We have a number of questions we're researching as an institute that are important to all Scarborough and Toronto residents. How can we achieve more residential density without gentrification? How do we leverage the new Meadoway that TRCA is investing in a way that creates sustainability across our suburban areas? How do we challenge larger condo developers for the new condos to perhaps include meeting space, exhibit space, and performance space? We're going through technological disruption. How do we make sure that the suburban areas take advantage of AI and driverless technologies? Markham is going through a smart city process. How do we bring that technology to the suburban areas of Toronto? How do we address the issues of poverty and training? How do we attract and welcome employers in our suburban areas? And how do we achieve density that's happening right now without losing that suburban tranquility? The Institute was formed out of the Rotary Community Renewal Campaign in 2014 as one of the 14 projects that came out of that campaign. One aspect of the Institute is to, we aspire to brand Scarborough as a place of ideas by taking this idea of new suburbanism, which is growing around the world and getting world support, as a Scarborough-based idea that's helping suburbs around the world in terms of how they do their planning and design and so on. What my ask is that we want to hold a conference in Scarborough, a global conference in Scarborough, that will enable thinkers, experts, academics, planners, architects to come and talk about how to make sure that as we're growing in our suburban areas of this city and around the world, that we take advantage of best ideas around the world. We'll bring together all sorts of people, and it'll be at the Bank of Montreal Learning Center. The ask is for the City of Toronto to come in as a major platinum level sponsor. We've been working with Councillor Thompson on this. We tried to advance it last year, but there was a little bit of turbulence last fall in the city, so we decided to throw it off this year. The 50,000 would bring Joel Kotkin in from MIT, who's a world-leading researcher on the suburbs. It'll also help defray the costs of the BMO Learning Center as well. I also am asking for $10,000 to be put into the planning department budget. We took a look at our stats. We've had 130 planners from 905 come to Scarborough. We've had 2 planners from the City of Toronto come to Scarborough to learn about the best ideas for suburban planning. If it's a matter of money, then if there's at least a line item budget so to allow City of Toronto planners to attend, that would be great. Certainly for the 50,000, City of Toronto politicians and senior staff and so on would be more than happy to come on as gratis. We already have sponsors, and we're going to get more. My company is sponsoring. Snap Scarborough, the newspaper, is sponsoring. Bank of Montreal has already come in as a sponsor, as well as the Ontario Professional Planners. This is what the conference outline is. We've already got speakers lined up from Australia, speakers from Europe, the US, England coming into Scarborough, so it's just a matter of pulling the trigger and getting the timing right. I'll end by just sharing with you that we had many workshops and give you a flavor for what this institute does in Scarborough. The first slide, we flew Judith DeJong in from Chicago to talk about how do we rethink the suburbs. She was partnered with Arvind Prasad from Peel, who talked about suburban planning in Peel that would apply to Scarborough. Joel Kotkin came in from Kansas City and talked about affordable housing. Paul Hunter, we flew him in from London, England, to talk about how do we wrestle with poverty in the suburban areas, and he was partnered with John Stapleton, who you might have heard of. On the last session, we've had Uber sponsored along with Peel Region, and we talked about what does Uber and driverless technologies and AI mean for the suburban areas. So we're getting a lot of great people coming out to our sessions.
Can you please wrap it up?
I will stop right now.
Oh, we still have 10 seconds.
Well, then I'll get rid of my slides then.
Okay, no, your time is up now. Thank you. Okay, questions? Okay, Councillor Bradford.
Thanks, Dave. Very interesting topic. I think planning in the suburbs is really going to be increasingly important going forward. So glad to see this sort of thinking and academic exercise taking place. What do you anticipate as the outcomes of this conference other than just like attending sessions? Is there anything that would be produced or generated or support the work that's going on here at the Institute?
Oh, tremendous benefits for the city. As the ideas come out, they'll filter into the official plan process. They'll go and they'll parallel the sidewalk labs and say, let's see what also we can do in the suburban areas. They'll drill down on how do we get those employers to Scarborough and suburban areas that have corporate social responsibility programs, that have leaders come in, that help donate money to the community and community causes. If we took advantage of the sustainability opportunities, Scarborough and suburbs are actually quite sustainable places when you take a look at all the flora and fauna, and there's ways to make that happen as well. So there's huge benefits that can come out of this.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor McKelvey?
Through your work, have you been looking at silos that might exist in planning? And do you have recommendations that have come forward through the work at the Institute about economic development plans, transit plans, and how they could be better integrated for a suburb, because as opposed to for a whole city?
Yeah, frankly, we need to renew the official plan. We need a city rethink our corporate structure. We're not getting the integrated thinking that we need to get to have the suburban areas function as strong as the core areas. In order to have a strong city in Toronto, we need strong suburbs and strong core. And that takes work at the staff level as well, and the programs that are developed. So they're really not there compared to when I look at other cities around the world.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next debutant is Michael Benetti. Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, good evening. My name is Michael Benetti, and I am a lifelong resident of the Scarborough area of Toronto, except for a 2-year absence where I lived in another city that seriously underfunded its city services. I'm here tonight because I am concerned with the direction that the proposed 2019 and past city budgets have led and are continuing to lead Toronto into. I want the city to increase revenue for the 2019 and future budgets. Growing up, I remember when Toronto, and when I speak about Toronto, I mean the 416, was known as the city that works. Planners and transportation professionals from around the world came here to learn about our expanding and efficient public transit system. The city dreamt big and built one of the world's largest zoos, built great civic places like New City Hall and the Scarborough Civic Center, which we are in tonight, and created metropolitan parks like the Toronto Islands, and most importantly, it properly funded our public services. For example, boulevard grass was always trimmed, snow was cleared in a timely manner, and we built amazing neighborhoods like the St. Lawrence District. We did this while paying city employees a good wage and not contracting out jobs to the lowest bidder that doesn't always care about how they perform their job. It was this Toronto that made me pursue a career as an urban planner. Toronto is now a global city and truly one of the best places to live in the world. I love this city and would not want to live anywhere else. However, we are no longer the city that works. Since amalgamation, our elected politicians have failed to invest in this city, and the city is now fraying at the edges. Our transit system is overcrowded and has not greatly expanded. Our streets are full of potholes. City services have deteriorated. Snow is not cleared in a timely manner. Boulevard grass has to reach your knee length before it is cut. And our EMS system, shockingly, is underfunded and stretched to its limit. Last year, some residents waited hours before an EMS vehicle and personnel were able to attend to them. This is a situation that happens a lot in decaying American cities like Detroit, and I never expected to hear that happening here in Toronto. In Detroit, it took a city council member waiting over a half an hour for an EMS to service them for a stroke before the city council properly funded the services there. I hope it does not take the same situation happening here before that happens. Our legacy projects from Toronto's first boom are in desperate need of restoration, be it the Toronto Islands Parks, which has facilities in desperate need of rejuvenation, to our underfunded zoo. To top it off, and as trivial as this may sound, our lack of investment even means that the city cannot hold a world-class fireworks display during events like Canada Day. If you look at our cousins Sydney, Australia, they put us to shame in what they do with their events. All these issues stem from the City of Toronto having a revenue generation problem perpetuated by current and past politicians who do not want to raise revenue, meaning taxes. I am tired of the City of Toronto having no vision to make this city great again. As a resident and property owner of Toronto, I want the City of Toronto to seek additional revenue in the 2019 budget and future budgets, and end the zero funding freeze on most city departments. To raise more revenue, you are going to have to look at raising property taxes well above inflation, looking at different revenue sources, such as a hotel tax, vehicle registration tax again, and growing more business in this city so that we can grow our non-residential business base. We have to stop the stagnation and being okay with doing the bare minimum in Toronto. As leaders, you all sometimes have to make unpopular decisions like raising taxes, but that is the price we pay to build a great city. Please better fund all departments in this city and vote to increase revenues this year. Let's be a Toronto that dreams big again and is not afraid to properly fund our services. We have been living off the legacy of what our politicians did 40 years ago. It's time for you guys to make some new legacies for this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Sorry, quick question for you. Thanks. Do you have a number in mind when you say raising property taxes? Like it's 2.5%.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we should do like, a Brampton that went 8% or something, but this keeping it near inflation is not working. The city, I know there's other levels of government that we try to get money from and all that, but at some point, we just need to fund this city properly, and staying near inflation is not enough. We need to raise it at least a little bit more.
Do you know how much percentage, and you might not, increase nets us each year?
No, I'm not. I can't say.
It's about 29 million bucks per point.
Mm-hmm.
So when this is a challenge that I think about too. When you look at the capital backlogs and stuff, when we're talking, more than 30 million bucks.
Yeah, but some of this backlog is because previous city councils since
Yeah. I just, I was wondering if you had a percentage that you were thinking.
Yeah, no, I couldn't say off the top of my head.
Okay. No, thanks for the deputation.
Some of the backlog is from the downloading from the province when we amalgamated.
Yes, and I understand it's a large
it's
issue.
not from past councils, it's from the amalgamation, the downloading that the province did to us in 1998.
Yes, but
Okay,
the
our
city
next
could fund it.
speaker, thank you. Our next speaker is Dana Snell.
Hi, I have a Mac and I'm kind of struggling over here, so I'm just going to try and hold this because apparently I need a proprietary cord. Okay, I'm going to try this. Okay, here is my presentation. So my name is Dana, and the reason I'm here today, thank you very much, is her, my 2.5-year-old daughter, Isla. A new Scarborough resident, new mom, but unfortunately when I think about my daughter's future, I don't feel excited. I actually feel very frightened because the recent report from the International Panel on Climate Change had some very devastating news. We have 11 years left to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% if we have any chance of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The planet has already warmed 1 degree, and we are already seeing worrying effects. Even global warming of 1.5 degrees will lead to extreme temperatures, more violent storms and flooding, food insecurity, mass migration of vulnerable populations, and the extinction of many animal and insect species upon which we depend. There will be negative impacts on people's physical and mental health, and economies will strain to deal with the fallout. We're going in the wrong direction. Global emissions for 2018 are at an all-time high. And if the world followed Canada's trajectory, we would be on track for warming of up to 4 degrees, which would mean the end of humanity on this planet. And just because Ontario isn't the highest emitting province in the country doesn't mean we're off the hook. In fact, it just means we have to work even harder. If we don't make some major changes now, we're on track for unbearable temperatures as soon as 2040. Isla will be just 24. The good news is we can do something about it. We can do our part to reduce emissions, create healthier communities free from harmful pollution, and be a model for other cities around the world seeking to reduce emissions. Our success can show those that would weaponize apathy that change is possible. We have the tools. We already have a program in place here in our city that is reducing emissions in creative and meaningful ways. The Transform TO program has seen greenhouse gas emissions drop by 24%, very impressively exceeding their 2012 goal of a 6% reduction. However, more work needs to be done. Thank you. Today I'm asking you to strengthen this program by fully funding it and providing $1.46 million in new and enhanced funding. And I'm asking you to go above and beyond the program by funding direct programs that will bring down greenhouse gas emissions and improve our neighborhoods, programs that retrofit buildings, make it easier to walk or cycle, and improve transit. Climate action needs to be a priority for both capital and operating budgets, and funding must be long-term, not vulnerable to the vagaries of different political parties. I want to be a grandparent just as much as the next parent. Lost my place. Please fully fund Transform TO and prioritize climate action. Thanks. In the upcoming budget, so that if Isla chooses to have a child, there will be a safe world for her to do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey, question?
Thank you. I hope you're a cool grandma. My question is, do you think that the city has potential for showing leadership right now, given that there's pushback for action on climate from another level of government?
Well, certainly the challenges are immense, and we might have to be more creative. That's where you come in, I suppose. I don't have the answers. There is, of course, a very strong dollars and cents push for prioritizing climate action, because the longer we wait to implement these changes, the more expensive they're going to be and the more disasters we're going to have to be cleaning up and and so far, so I'd say prioritize the financial cost. And
so would you challenge us to be leaders in this area?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next debutant is Victoria Ju.
Good evening. My name is Victoria, and I reside in Ward 25. I am involved in 2 resident-led community groups called the Malvern Food Security Group, Malvern Food Security Work Group and 42 Voices. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I would like to talk about Transform TO, Toronto's climate action plan for my deputation. I want to express my support for the Transform TO 2019 budget that city staff presented, but also want to note that this is the bare minimum of what is needed. The recently released greenhouse gas inventory shows that progress is being made to reduce Toronto's emissions, but we need to redouble the effort. Accelerated action is required to achieve the 2030 target of 65% reduction and avoid dangerous climate change. 7 key points that I think would be great to focus on are: priority focus on deep retrofits in buildings is critical, along with clear metrics. Investment to accelerate electric vehicles needing charging up. City resources should be leveraged to expand financing for low carbon actions. Resourcing community engagement is central to achieving results. A robust communications plan is urgently needed to support engagement. Declining funding trajectory is a common is a concern as the 2030 target looms, and presentation of a citywide Transform TO investment would be useful. With regards to the investment of electric vehicles, I think the city's focus could be on electric vehicle infrastructure. As an EV owner, it would be helpful to have some EV chargers built and implemented in Ward 25. Having them installed in publicly owned places would probably be the most beneficial. For example, the Malvern Library or Rec Center, and public parking spots like Green Peas. With regards to resourcing community engagement, this area could create a larger groundswell to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction in ways that would drive valuable community benefits, including public health, community resilience, local jobs, and improved social equity. As I mentioned, I am part of 2 resident-led community groups where their missions complement climate mitigation and adaptation. And if we were able to work collaboratively with the city, we could mobilize action. There are other active community groups as well. This also has the potential to catch the attention of other residents who may become motivated to get involved. I appreciate this opportunity to present my perspective and suggestions on the 2019 city budget, and look forward to collaborate with the city and advance the implementation of Transform TO. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much, Victoria. We're definitely hearing a lot on the Transform TO. Jennifer and I were just saying tonight, Rosemary and others, so thanks for that. Do you have any ideas on how the city could address the EV charging piece? I think that is coming down the pipe quickly, and I'm not sure if we have a strategy, particularly like in some of the more urban areas where a lot of people have street parking, maybe not necessarily driveways. Have you given any thought to that?
Well, I guess I could look into it and I guess maybe connect with you. But I think the City of Toronto did a pilot project of 3 EV charging spots in like the more of the core of Toronto. But I guess maybe I can look into how that was done and how we can maybe bring that to Scarborough.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So in the next month or two, there's going to be a resiliency report coming out to the city. So I just wanted to encourage you to please look for that and perhaps write letters of support in it, because it's not probably going to be implemented in this year, but going forward. And in that, I think it's going to have some discussion about retrofits for buildings. So I was wondering if you could speak to that specifically, on how you think that's going to have an impact on greenhouse gases and why it's the way to move forward.
I'm a little bit more familiar with some of the retrofits that was kind of subsidized by the province, like insulation, changing of your windows, and also like the microfit program where you could put solar panels on your house. I think those types of retrofits was really beneficial. I know that was at the province level, but that Green Ontario Fund is now gone. So,
okay. And do you think that if the city were to go down that road of retrofitting buildings, for example, TCHC buildings, that we'd have not just carbon savings, but also energy savings?
Yes. Okay. And one other thing, we did a community hub forum, and actually retrofitting those community centers and community hubs would inspire, I guess, more change. There's a full report that we have on that.
Okay, please share it with me, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Matter. Following David Matter is Candice Loom. David, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, TO staff, Speaker Francis, Jennifer McKelvey, and Brad Bradford. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here representing the Residents Rising Group. They're in the Kingston, Galloway, Orton Park area and West Hill. So we really served both wards, the 24 and 25. I've been serving those for about 30 years, working in both wards, but for the same organizations. So we're talking today about housing and homelessness. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Tory and council members who recently voted in favor 21-4 of the Housing Now plan, a plan to build 11 city properties. This is a great start, adding more housing to a much-needed market, the 11 locations of which 2 are in Scarborough only. 777 Victoria Park at the Victoria Park subway station and 705 Warden Avenue. Each site has 450 units with a total of 900 units. Only half of the units will be affordable units with rents ranging from 40 to 80% of market value. A bid for each site will come from the public sector and TCHC. The city will retain ownership of the land for a 99-year lease. The city will waive $176 million in development charges and fees and $104 million in property taxes. Also, thanks to Brad Bradford, on January 30th, during the Planning and Housing Committee, and speaking with the parliamentary secretary, a request was made to declare a state of emergency for housing and homelessness. The answer was no. There are 245,000 rental households in TO facing affordability issues and concerns. There is also 180,000 people on the waiting list, on the housing centralized waiting list. Toronto is the world's 9th least affordable housing market, according to a survey in 2018. In 2017, the average rent for a one-bedroom condo was $1,803, while a one-bedroom purpose-built was $1,194. That is unaffordable. In 2009, City Council approved a 10-year housing opportunity Toronto Action Plan, 2010 to 2020. The plan included a Toronto Housing Charter, Opportunity for All, which recognized that fair access to full range of housing is fundamental to strengthening our economy and communities, and health, social well-being of residents and communities. The city recommends that the province and the federal government become partners in this. And recently, with the recent announcement with the Ford government, will make it easier to evict tenants from 10 days down to 6 days. This housing challenge requires new ideas, bold action, and strong leadership. We cannot afford to ignore our current housing crisis. A time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? No. Thank you. Candace? Loon? She's not here. Cyprian Owens? And our next deputant following would be Taylor James Williams. Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cyprian Owens, and I'm a nutrition coordinator. I'm here this evening just to provide some insight into the school nutrition program and to implore this committee not just to continue funding of our program, but to use your authority to actually increase the funding for the program as a better way for us to assist our students. I currently operate out of Pauline Johnson Junior Public School, which is located in Ward 22. At PJ, we offer a morning meal to our students. Our programs serve approximately 320 students on a daily basis, and we run 5 days per week. We serve grains, fruits, and vegetables. Just give you a few of what we serve: milk, yogurt, cheese, whole grain crackers, Triscuits, raisin breads, samosas, apples, oranges, cucumbers, and carrots. You know, all healthy stuff for our kids. Our program is a universal program. So we serve everyone regardless of their ability to contribute financially or physically. And we try our best to respect religious restrictions and work to accommodate most allergies. The student nutrition program receives funding from both the city and the province. And on occasions, we do receive additional funding, which is much needed from parents and student fundraising efforts. Our volunteers consist of parents and members of our school community. It might be surprising to many of us how many of our students begin their school days with nothing to eat, and is reassured knowing that at about 9:30 a.m., they themselves or their class designate can pick up their bins, and they have a much needed and healthy meal to eat. In many cases, students stop me while I'm walking in the halls, and they try whispering in my ear, asking me, do you have extra cracker, extra chocolate milk. I didn't have any lunch today. So, as members of the school community, we all share a sense of gratitude, knowing that through your continued contribution and support of our other partners, we can continue to provide this much needed support for our students. Our teachers who work so closely with the students know how much this program means to them and how much they look forward to receiving that morning meal. And they too have expressed how grateful they are that the program exists. Our school community is a very diverse one. With this said, our student body have a say as to what is served in the program. And we try as much to accommodate them as much as the guidelines allow us to do. Our program is currently facing many challenges. Chief among them is financial and a lack of volunteers to actually help deliver the program to our students. As our city population continues to grow, so does our school population. And at this time, our financial resources are stretched thin. In many cases, we're just able to keep up with the ever-growing demand of our community. We need additional volunteers for our program, as most of our parents are now holding full-time jobs, and they're not able to volunteer as they would like to. At this time, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank members of the committee for your financial support in the past, and I'm hoping you can intensify your support in the future as we continue to meet the needs of our students. Thank you for listening and your continued support.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor James Williams. No. Merhit Ivabu. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. What is the name? Mehret? M-E-H-E-R-E-T. No? Johnny Dibb? I know he's not here. He's a constituent of mine. No. Progress TL. Andrew McKenzie? Following Andrew is Ramon Cruz.
Hi. Just want to thank the Budget Committee for allowing us to do this. It's very cool of you guys. My name's Andrew McKenzie, and I'm actually a paramedic with the city. To be honest, I actually wasn't going to come today. I'm not one actually to kind of do these things, to speak out on kind of issues, but I mean, if I don't, who else is going to do it? This year, the proposed budget is to hire only 12 new paramedics. I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about that number and why we should increase it. I was actually watching a live deputation today down at City Hall. I got to see one of my colleagues, Eden, actually speak, and he actually kind of went through some of the day-to-day mechanics of what we do, but I thought I'd like to focus on just a specific story to kind of shed light on why we need more paramedics. I could talk to you guys about graphs and numbers, but you already know all that information. So this call happened on a pretty busy day for us. We were called to call. We were about 10 hours into our shift, no break, no lunch. That's pretty common for us. And we were actually at the hospital with a patient, and they were calling us to come out, even though we had a patient on the bed, to go do this call. The call was for an elderly female. She fell outside and had broken her arm. Now, on busy days, sometimes we can actually stack calls. If our dispatch finds that the calls are minor enough, we'll actually stack them and hold them, sometimes for up to an hour, even 2 hours. So this was a stacked call. By the time we got there, the patient was angry and furious, like I'm sure all of us would be, right? Some of the things that she said to us: "What took you so long? Been waiting for over an hour. I was scared for my own life. Now, this is a minor-ish call, but I mean, to the patient, it's pretty serious. Many people don't deal with 911 on a daily basis. The back of the ambulance is my office, but for many people, it's somewhere they don't want to be. We had already lost her trust before the call had even began, which is pretty disheartening. I mean, I could stop there at the 2-minute mark. I think that'd probably already give you a good idea of why we need more paramedics, but I don't want to. I want to keep telling you about some of the things that she started to say to us. For the next hour and a half, I cared for her, splinted her arm, gave her medications, treated her as best I could like my own grandmother, brought her to the hospital, gave reports to the triage nurses, monitored her and her vital signs the whole time. I did the best that I could. But she said to me throughout this whole call, I'm going to call your manager and tell them you're the worst paramedic in the city. You're going to be fired after this. How did you even get a job? You should be ashamed of yourself. Now, these common things might be a shock to some of you, but this is pretty common for us as paramedics. We deal with it on a daily basis. She said something, though, to me I won't forget. I moved her to the bed at the hospital, and again, I thanked her for being patient, and I apologized for the wait time. And she looked me right in the eye. She looked me right in my eye and said, I hope one day that one of your family members falls on the ground like me and is left there to die. It's comments like these that stick with me. It pops into my head when I'm not at work, when I'm trying to enjoy dinner with my family or spend time with my friends. It's comments like these that stick. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for us. I would even say this is a daily occurrence happening with every paramedic across the city. We've got a stressful job. We're put into situations that are time sensitive, and we need to focus. We need to rely on training and past experiences, but sadly, we're losing this because we're tired from being overworked and understaffed. The morale within Toronto Paramedic Services is going into an all-time low. And that story I just told is a perfect example for what's accelerating this poor morale. We're running on fumes, but fumes can only keep the ambulance going for so long. And now the city only wants to hire 12 paramedics. This is nowhere near enough. We have paramedics retiring, moving to new services. Some can't work due to physical and mental injuries, and some are just quitting. 12 paramedics won't even come close to the number that we're going to lose this year from the reasons I just listed. I'd like to ask the council to increase these numbers. But before I'd finish, I'd actually like to ask everyone here a question before I finish, and everyone on the council as well. How many of you know someone who's had to call 911, whether that's a friend, a family member, or colleague? If it's all right with the council, could you guys lift up your hands if you know someone?
I don't think you're here to ask questions. We're here to listen.
I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
You can finish your deputation.
I apologize. Sorry for that. Last year, though, we had over 400,000 911 calls. And I'm only saying this because these patients are not just patients. They're us. It's family members. It's friends. It could even be you one day. So I ask that the council please increase the number of paramedics hired this year so we can serve the public to the best of our abilities that I know that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next deputant. Okay, Councillor Bradford.
Do you have a sense of how many colleagues are on leave for stress or?
It's really hard to say. That number changes all the time. I mean, we have over 1,000 paramedics. I'd say it's really hard to say. I'd say even at least 30 to 40 this year are probably going to be retiring. And then we have other people, like I said before, that are going to new services. And if that new service can provide them full-time opportunity, they'll most likely leave this service. And then accidents happen every day on the job, so it's really hard to gauge a number.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
No problem.
Okay, our next deputant is Ramon Cruz. Is Mr. Cruz here? Okay, if you can come down, please.
Good evening to everyone. Good evening to Ms. McKelvey, Mr. Secretary Janis, or another one. I came here in Canada, or we came here in Canada in 1993, and I live here in Scarborough since 1995. Worked with TD Bank, Magna, consultant for ATNA, official representative of IHC Limited. Volunteer for local, municipal, provincial election since 1997, and I'm a non-political person. I came here, I was an entrepreneur in the Philippines, OEM, contractor, supplier, sole proprietor before I came here in 1993. I met a consultant to the program project manager who has a building system and technology which is being implemented in different parts of the world, namely Thailand, Malaysia, Seychelles, Hong Kong, and some part of Middle East. I have proposed this planned, well-planned, total planned community for IHC Limited in our country since 1996. The building system that meets or exceeds the International Code of Building Standard. I went to BDC to apply for a bridge financing, and I have actually registered a limited company or corporation also here last year. But unfortunately, I cannot produce yet the requirement because I don't have any employees here, as I am an entrepreneur with myself, all doing this hardship. Anyway, if there is something I can or we can do to help the affordable housing, I can show you everything that we have and I have proposed to the office of our president in our country for the last how many years. And thank you very much. And you may get in touch with me with my email. That is with Ms. Lin. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Miroslav? You know the drill. 5 minutes?
I don't know if you, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
People have talked about the environment, TTC, and a whole bunch of stuff. Go for it. This, I'm hard of hearing. AODA, this helps me hear when I put, until recently, didn't work here. They upgraded the systems. The city does a horrible job, not horrible. It can do a lot better for people with disabilities to commute. Councillor McKelvey's constituents most likely are not going to come all the way from the other side of Scarborough, Rouge River, Rouge Park, whatever, Ward 25. I'm still thinking the old systems. That's when all the meetings are either here, downtown, you know, the city could support doing deputations via Skype or things like that. I spent 8 years in deputations at the General Government Management Committee called General, the new name. And you know, you sit in that committee, you're gonna learn my deputations. The city can do a lot better job using technology, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I guess, and help with Skype or other alternatives, Skype, video conferencing. You know, not everybody can make it here. My father's 95. He has a mobility issue. He lives in Edgegar. There's no chance in heck that he's going to make it here. There's a lot of your constituents, and I know at least 5 in Councillor McKelvey's area, that will never come here, you know. That, and with technology, you can also help people, new immigrants to have a language barrier, where there's a language barrier or a, I don't like using the word disability and the AODA. You can do it a lot better. Both of you, well, 3 of you could have held your own sessions in your wards. How many people from York, South, Western, your ward came all the way here to Scarborough, you know? I love that the meetings could be used technology like Skype, you know? Just think about it. Have this work. And Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke York community councils are never live streamed, unlike downtown. Not a single meeting outside Toronto City Hall gets live streamed on the YouTube channel. Rogers Media, the Rogers Community Channel, used to have the broadcasting. I am on Bell. They haven't had it for many years. So to engage more participation, there's 650,000 people in Scarborough. There's how many behind me? Let's say 100. That doesn't even come close to all this meeting. Less than, in average, 20 people come, you know. You need to fund all the technology from the government. Thank you.
Oh, you too. Question.
Hi. So last year, the mayor held his executive meeting here.
That was wonderful. I was here.
You were here? Great. And I know it was a big kerfuffle for staff because they had to set up cameras and set it all up. So do you think it would be worthwhile to install, like you say, stuff so that you could live stream at all the different civic centers? And that might, one, community council or this meeting could be live streamed, but also, for example, committee meetings could come here more often, like the executive or planning or infrastructure.
I would, excuse me, I would love for executive committee to come here in Weston, in Etobicoke, and all that for all the important meetings, you know, especially like in Scarborough. If things deal with something in Scarborough, they should come here. Okay. And I know the mayor was here a few hours ago, the afternoon meeting, you know.
So after amalgamation, when all the committee meetings started being held downtown, you think that's unfair and maybe we should spread them around a little bit better?
Yes, it's completely unfair, especially for your constituents, because you're the farthest away from City Hall, from all three of you, your constituents, you know. Okay. 2 hours to City Hall.
Sorry, okay. Coming out here.
No, but the thing is that they're still having meetings in the suburbs.
It's for the councils, but not the committee.
Yeah, no, they are. They're having committee meetings. Azim Khan. Five minutes?
All the councillors, that's a great to know, and especially Jennifer McKelvey, we heard good things about you, Jennifer. Thank you. I'm here today to talk about sports field, or the lack of sports field. I'm involved with softball cricket in the area around here, East Toronto, Scarborough area. We have about 600 members, and for the past year, or for the past 15, 16 years, we only had access to one additional park ground. And the type of game we play is not a game that requires a Sunnybrook Park type of cricket pitch. We're talking regular park ground. Like Dean Park, there's, I think it's classified as a C type of ground. But we do not have access to enough grounds. We've tried, imagine that, we've grown from about 50 players to roughly 600 players now. We play on Sunday afternoon. We get the community involved. This year we're having folks from international games, from Florida, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, New York, New Jersey, Guyana, Antigua coming up to Toronto to play. And the biggest problem we have is to find a ground or additional grounds. I'm looking at Markham now to see if I can seek help from them. Our final games are played on a Sunday, and I can't even get Ashtonby to play a game down there. I'm not talking about the regular cricket games, the cricket pitches. I can't, they wouldn't even give me Ashtonby to play there. I have to go to the University of Toronto ground. It will cost about $700 to get that ground for one day, whereas I can use Ashtonby ground maybe for 1/3 of the price. So I'm asking you if you can help me with a few things here, or help us, the community. One is to get to us more grounds available to us for softball cricket. I'm not talking hardball cricket, softball cricket. It's a game that's over 150 years old. And We need some city support. We're not asking for financial aid. We just want your support to ensure we get these grounds and the grounds are properly maintained. And I'm looking for improved communication with the parks officials. We know what we want. We can talk to them. We know how to do ground maintenance, which is hardly being done. There was a problem with the ground. The lines got busted somehow, and we were blamed for it when it had nothing to do with us. But that's the type of lack of communication or improved communication will help resolve some of these things. And whatever we're doing wrong, we're ready to listen. But I want you to know, when people come to this country, they come and tour the international games. They don't look at just at cricket. They take back the way we treat them. And if we can give them good fields to play on, proper accommodation, we want to work with the city to get them accommodation, they go back and talk good things about Toronto. And for twice now we've had the international tournaments, and we tried our best. Now we're seeking out the council to help us achieve. We're going there end of August, August 30th, 31st, and September 1. That's our weekend. We need proper grounds, and if you can help us, we'll be more than happy. We'll pay our permit fees. That's not a problem. We just want the availability of those grounds. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have heard from many residents about the need for cricket pitches. Is that the right word?
Yes.
In Scarborough, and have talked to parks. And I know that it's a fairly lengthy process, but I'm wondering if your association and the cricket associations might be willing to send us letters that we could provide to parks so we can underscore how important that ask is.
We certainly will do that, but I want you to understand that the cricket pitches you're talking about, it's for the hardball regular cricket that you see on the international. I'm not even going there. I just need availability of grounds that, like, classified as C grounds and B grounds that have across the parks. We just want it to become available to us.
And do you have this tournament is this year?
Yeah, this tournament is this year.
Maybe we can contact you about seeing what we can do to help for this year and then going forward for building an actual cricket pitch. I know Joyce Trimmer is planning to have a community center, and it'll have an indoor cricket pitch, but I know that it sounds like there's considerable desire for an outdoor one in Scarborough.
Oh, there, yeah. But I'm saying that's the regular.
So if we build it, they will come?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We can discuss this a bit further next time. I'll send you information.
Right, because it sounds like you also need an interim solution until we get to having that permanent field.
Absolutely, because the school grounds cost us about 50% more than the parks ground.
Right.
And that's what we have to do right now. We have 8 of those.
And would you be willing to take me out so I could learn the difference between soft and hard cricket?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So you've got a date. Our last debutant is Brenda Thompson. Okay, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Nunziata and members of the Budget Committee. I feel like this budget is very rushed. I've seen a few budgets come and go, and really when it comes right down to it, I think a budget is about our vision of what Toronto, and by extension, what Scarborough can be. And right now we have a mayor who's promised not to raise property taxes beyond the rate of inflation. And we have city staff, I think they tried to work within the confines of that promise when they produced the budget. But as member of councils, I feel council members also have a responsibility to their constituents. And if you choose to vote for a different vision, I think that's, especially if you believe that this budget will cause unnecessary hardship or further exacerbate the homeless, the housing, the transit crisis that we face. I believe that that's something you should do. And with regard to transit, which is what I want to speak about, I believe Scarborough transit riders bear the brunt of this crisis. Scarborough is so spread out. we're so reliant on buses. If anything, service gets cut, the buses bear the brunt of that. If fares go up, because Scarborough has a lot of people who are struggling financially and who rely on transit to get around, they bear the brunt of that. And earlier this week, the group I'm with, Scarborough Transit Action, we did a workshop at the East Scarborough storefront. And I'd just like to point out that some of the people from there, Colleen, thank you, Colleen, and Dave, were at that workshop, and we talked about transit issues in Scarborough. And what I heard from people was the Lawrence 54 East bus and how they wait. And they wait for that bus to come. And when it comes, it's full, and it passes them by. And also, there's very short, there's not really good frequent service on the weekends. And so I can understand their frustration, and also I'm confused because the Lawrence East 54 bus has a higher ridership than the St. Clair West streetcar. So that tells me we really need to take the service up a notch. Even our articulated buses only carry 77 people. A streetcar can carry 251 people at a time. So we're asking a lot of the residents that live along Lawrence East. And I think if we have this 10-cent fare increase, we're basically telling them, you're going to pay more to watch a bus go by. And in raising that fare by 10 cents, we're also going to push more people off the transit system that we have, and they're going to be walking. And in Scarborough, if you live between Lawrence and Kingston and Markham and Lawrence, it's a 40-minute walk to the grocery store. And where I live in Scarborough, if you live between Midland and Kingston Road and Markham and Kingston Road, it's a 40-minute walk to the grocery store. And so it's really going to cause people a lot of hardship, and I really, really hope that you don't vote for the 10-cent fare increase. I really hope you figure out a way to find the money, because transit riders are doing everyone a favor, and especially in Scarborough, we need to support them in the best way we can. Thank you.
Questions? No? Okay, thank you. I'd like to move that the Budget Subcommittee for Scarborough and Etobicoke Civic Center consultations received for information, the public presentations, and the communications submitted by members of the public. All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Bradford. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, Brad, do you think we can find the car? Yeah, so it's we'll take
Scarborough. So which is next is the Tobacco.
Yeah, so,
So Mikey said he'd show us where to get to.